Welcome to another episode of Belongs to the Shadows. I'm your creepy host, Jaime Bennett. And on this episode, viewer discretion is advised, of course. I will be talking about the history of Halloween, hence why I look like this, also known as Samhain. I hope you enjoy this spooktacular episode. So, I'm going to go into the history of Halloween. I thought that it would be interesting to have the whole history behind Halloween. It's not just about trick-or-treating. It's not just about candy and scary movies. Although all that stuff is fun, there is a history behind what we know as Halloween today. So here we go. This is going to come from the History Channel. Of course, history.com/topics/Halloween/history of Halloween. So, I'm also going to go into Samhain. I'm going to be talking about that. A lot of people pronounce it Samhain. That's not how you pronounce it. It is pronounced Samhain. I guess, everybody pronounces things differently. But we call it Samhain. Halloween is a holiday celebrated each year on October 31st, which happens to be Monday. So I thought that I would put this episode out as close to Halloween as I could possibly get. So yeah, this is pre-recorded. Surprise, pre-recorded. But that's all right. It's still exciting and, things can still be awesome. So here we go. We know that Halloween happens or is celebrated each year on October 31st. Well, it will occur Monday of this year. Not working Monday. I did take that day off. Surprise, surprise. I am all about Halloween. I celebrate Halloween all year round. Anybody who knows me knows this fact. The tradition originated with the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain, or as some people pronounces it, Samhain, when people would light bonfires and wear costumes to ward off ghosts. In the 8th century, Pope Gregory III designated November 1st as a time to honor All Saints. Soon, All Saints' Day incorporated some of the traditions of Samhain. The evening before was known as All Hallows' Eve. Just hearing that makes me so happy. It makes me extremely happy. I love Halloween. It is so wonderful. And later, Halloween. People now call it Halloween. And over time, Halloween had evolved into a day of activities like trick-or-treating, carving jack-o'-lanterns, festive gatherings, donning costumes, and eating candy or treats. The ancient origins of Halloween. Halloween's origins do date back to the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain. The Celts who lived 2,000 years ago, mostly in the area that is known as Ireland or the United Kingdom, northern France, celebrated their new year on November 1st. That day marked the end of summer and the harvest and the beginning of the dark, cold winter, a time of year that was often associated with human death. Celts had believed that on the night before the new year, the boundary between the world of the living and the world of the dead became blurred. On the night of October 31st, they celebrated Samhain, when it was believed that the ghosts of the dead returned to Earth. I believe that. I believe that fully. In addition to causing trouble and damaging crops, Celts thought that the presence of the otherworldly spirits made it easier for druids or Celtic priests to make predictions about the future. For a people entirely dependent on the volatile natural world, these prophecies were an important source of comfort during the long, dark, cold winter. To commemorate the event, Druids would build huge sacred bonfires where the people gathered to burn crops, animals as sacrifices to the Celtic deities. During the celebration, the Celts wore costumes typically consisting of animal heads or skins and attempted to tell each other's fortunes. When the celebration was over, they relit their hearth fires, which they had extinguished earlier that evening, from the sacred bonfire to help protect them during the coming winter. Did you know this fact? 1/4 of all of the Halloween candy sold annually in the U.S. is purchased. I called it Halloween candy because it's purchased around Halloween. That's an interesting fact. It is a marketable holiday, and they make lots and lots of money selling candy during Halloween time. By AD 43, the Roman Empire had conquered the majority of the Celtic territory. In the course of the 400 years that they ruled the Celtic lands, 2 festivals of the Roman origin were combined with the traditional Celtic festivities or celebration of Samhain. The first was Ferilia. I hope that I'm pronouncing that right. A day in late October when the Romans traditionally commemorated the passing of the dead. The second was a day to honor Pomona, the Roman goddess of fruit and trees. The symbol of Pomona is the apple, and the incorporation of this celebration into Samhain probably explains the tradition of bobbing for apples that is practiced today on Halloween. I get so excited about Halloween, y'all. It makes me so happy. I just feel like it's the time in the year where, like, you don't get judged for being different. People hide behind masks pretty much all year round, and it seems like, on Halloween, people kind of show a little bit more of themselves than they usually would. Because maybe wearing a costume makes them more comfortable expressing themselves. Isn't that crazy? It's completely crazy. But I just love Halloween. It just makes me so happy. I feel like a kid in a candy shop. I just love it so much. All Saints' Day on May 13th, AD 609, Pope Boniface dedicated the Pantheon in Rome in honor of all Christian martyrs, and the Catholic Feast of All Martyrs' Day was established in the Western Church. Pope Gregory III later expanded the festival to include all saints as well as all martyrs and moved the observance from May 13th to November 1st. By the 9th century, the influence of Christianity had spread into Celtic lands, where it gradually blended with and supplanted older Celtic rites. In AD 1000, the church made November 2nd All Souls' Day, a day to honor the dead. It's widely believed today that the church was attempting to replace the Celtic Festival of the Dead with a related church-sanctioned holiday. All Souls' Day was celebrated similarly, I can't say that, similar to, there we go, we'll say that word. It was celebrated similar to Samhain with big bonfires, parades, and dressing up in costumes as saints, angels, and devils. The All Saints' Day celebration was also called All Hallows or All Hallowmas. From the Middle English, All meaning All Saints' Day. And the night before it, the traditional night of Samhain in the Celtic religion began to be called All Hallows' Eve, and eventually Halloween. Isn't that interesting? It's amazing what we learn when we research things like this and we go back in our history for things like this. It's just absolutely amazing. Halloween comes to America. The celebration of Halloween was extremely limited in the colonial New England because of the rigid Protestant belief systems there. Halloween was much more common in Maryland and the southern colonies. As the beliefs and customs of the different European ethnic groups and the American Indians meshed, a distinctly American version of Halloween began to emerge. The first celebrations included play parties, which were public events held to celebrate the harvest. Neighbors would share stories of the dead, tell each other's fortunes, and dance and sing. Did you know, here's a side fact, did you know more people are buying costumes for their pets? Americans spent nearly $5 million on costumes for their pets in 2021, more than double what they spent in the year 2010. Isn't that interesting? Colonial Halloween festivities also featured the telling of ghost stories and mischief-making of all kinds. By the middle of the 19th century, annual autumn festivities were common, but Halloween was not yet celebrated everywhere in the country. In the second half of the 19th century, America was flooded with new immigrants. These new immigrants, especially the millions of Irish fleeing the Irish potato famine, helped to popularize the celebration of Halloween nationally. I'm Irish. At least I think I'm Irish. I'm pretty sure I'm Irish, and it's nice to know that we helped start the tradition of Halloween. The history of trick-or-treating. Borrowing from European traditions, Americans began to dress up in costumes and go house to house, asking for food or money, a practice that had eventually become today's trick-or-treat tradition. Young women believed that on Halloween they could divine the name or appearance of their future husband by doing tricks with yarn or apple parings or mirrors. Well, dang, I should have tried that, huh? Just kidding. In the late 1800s, there was a move in America to mold Halloween into a holiday more about community and neighbors getting together than about ghosts, pranks, and witchcraft. At the turn of the century, Halloween parties for both children and adults became the most common way to celebrate the day. Parties focused on games and food of the season and most wonderful festive costumes. Parents were encouraged by newspapers and community leaders to take anything frightening or grotesque out of Halloween celebrations. Because of these efforts, Halloween lost most of its superstitious and religious overtones by the beginning of the 20th century. Wow. Just wow. Halloween parties. By the 1920s and the 1930s, Halloween had become a secular but community-centered holiday. With parades, town-wide Halloween parties as the featured entertainment, despite the best efforts of many schools and communities, vandalism had begun to plague some celebrations in many of the communities during this time. By the 1950s, town leaders had successfully limited vandalism, and Halloween had evolved into a holiday directed mostly as a young due to the high numbers of young children during the 50s baby boom. Parties moved from town civic centers into the classroom or home, where they could be more easily accommodated. Between 1920 and the year of 1950, the centuries-old practice of trick-or-treating was also revived. Trick-or-treating was a relatively inexpensive way for an entire community to share the Halloween celebration. In theory, families could also prevent tricks from being played on them by providing the neighborhood children with small treats. Or if you're really awesome, large candy bars. Because, that's the house that kids would want to hit, is the house with the full-size candy bars. Just saying. Thus, a new tradition had been born, and it had continued to grow to today. Americans spend an estimated $6 billion annually on Halloween, making it the country's second largest commercial holiday, of course, after Christmas. Christmas is the largest. So there's Halloween movies. Speaking of commercial success, scary Halloween movies had a long history of being box office hits. Classic Halloween movies that include Halloween franchise based on the 1978 original film directed by none other than John Carpenter and starring Donald Pleasence, Nick Castle, Jamie Lee Curtis, and Tony Moran. In Halloween, a young boy named Michael Myers murders his 17-year-old sister and is committed to jail, only to escape as a teen on Halloween night and seek out his old home and a new target. A direct sequel to the original Halloween had been released in 2018, starring Jamie Lee Curtis and Nick Castle. A sequel to that, Halloween Kills, the 12th film in the Halloween franchise overall, was released in the year 2021. It's considered a classic horror film. Down to its spooky soundtrack, Halloween inspired other iconic slasher films such as Scream, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, and more family-friendly Halloween movies include Hocus Pocus, The Nightmare Before Christmas, Beetlejuice, and The Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, all of my personal favorites. All Souls Day and Soul Cakes. The American Halloween tradition of trick-or-treating probably dates back to the early All Souls Day parade in England. During the festivities, poor citizens would beg for food, and families would give them pastries called soul cakes in return for their promise to pray for the family's dead relatives. The distribution of soul cakes was encouraged by the church as a way to replace the ancient practice of leaving food and wine for roaming spirits. The practice, which was referred to as going a-souling, was eventually taken up by children who would visit the houses in their neighborhood and be given ale, food, and money. The tradition of dressing up in costume for Halloween has both European and Celtic roots. Hundreds of years ago, winter was an uncertain and frightening time. Food supplies often ran low, and for the many people afraid of the dark, the short days of winter were full of constant worry. On Halloween, when it was believed that ghosts came back to the earthly world, people thought that they would encounter ghosts if they left their homes. To avoid being recognized by these ghosts, people would wear a mask when they left their homes after dark, so that the ghosts would mistake them for fellow spirits. On Halloween, to keep ghosts away from their houses, people would place bowls of food outside their home to appease the ghosts and prevent them from attempting to enter. Yeah, there's a lot to the history of Halloween. Like I said, it's not just about trick-or-treating. It's not just about candy. Black cats and ghosts on Halloween. Halloween has always been a holiday filled with mystery, magic, and superstition. It had began as a Celtic end-of-summer festival during which people felt especially close to deceased relatives and friends. For these friendly spirits, they set places at the dinner table, left treats on doorsteps and along the side of the road, and lit candles to help loved ones find their way back to the spirit world. Today's Halloween ghosts are often depicted as more fearsome and malevolent. And our customs and superstitions are scarier too. We avoid crossing paths with black cats. I don't know why. I love black cats, and to me, black cats are a sign of good luck. They're not bad luck. Afraid that they might bring us bad luck, this idea has its roots in the Middle Ages when many people believed that witches avoided detection by turning themselves into black cats. We try not to walk under ladders for the same reason. This superstition may have come from the ancient Egyptians who believed that triangles were sacred. It also may have something to do with the fact that walking under a leaning ladder tends to be fairly unsafe. And around Halloween especially, we try to avoid breaking mirrors, stepping on cracks in the road, or spilling salt. There's a lot of Halloween history. It's very interesting to be learning some of this. It's very interesting to do research on this. There is so much more to Halloween than what I'm going to be able to cover in this episode. So this episode may have a second part to it. Halloween matchmaking and lesser-known rituals. But what about the Halloween traditions and beliefs that today's trick-or-treaters have forgotten all about? Many of these obsolete rituals focused on future instead of the past and the living instead of the dead. In particular, many had to do with helping young women identify their future husbands and reassuring them that they would someday, with luck, by next Halloween, be married in the 18th century Ireland. A matchmaking cook might bury a ring in her mashed potatoes on Halloween night, hoping to bring true love to the diner or to dinner who found it. So to the diner who found it, like if a man found a ring in these mashed potatoes, they were hoping that, he would bring it back to the diner and that would be their future husband. In Scotland, fortune tellers recommended that an eligible young woman name a hazelnut for each of her suitors and then toss the nuts into the fireplace, the nut that burned to ashes rather than popping or exploding. The story went represented the girl's future husband. In some versions of this legend, the opposite was true. The nut that burned away symbolized a love that would not last. Another fairy tale had it that if a young woman ate a sugary concoction made out of walnuts, hazelnuts, and nutmeg before bed on Halloween night, she would dream about her future husband. Young women tossed apple peels over their shoulders, hoping that the peels would fall on the floor in the shape of their future husband's initials. Tried to learn about their futures by peering at egg yolks floating in a bowl of water, and stood in front of mirrors in darkened rooms holding candles and looking over their shoulders for their future husbands' faces. So you see, there are a lot of traditions that people don't usually talk about, like, young women trying to find their future husbands or trying to see what their future husbands look like. Other rituals were more competitive. At some Halloween parties, the first guest to find a burr on a chestnut hunt would be the first to marry. At others, the first successful apple bobber would be the first down the aisle. Of course, whether we're asking for romantic advice or trying to avoid 7 years of bad luck, each of these Halloween superstitions relies on the goodwill of the very same spirits whose presence the early Celts felt so keenly. So that came from the History Channel website, and I am going to look up the history of Samhain, which I'm pretty sure the History Channel had a page on that as well. So let's go into that, shall we? Samhain is a pagan religious festival originated from an ancient Celtic spiritual tradition. In modern times, Samhain A Gaelic word pronounced Samhain, some people call it Samhain because that's how it's written, but it is pronounced Samhain. It is usually celebrated from October 31st to November 1st to welcome the harvest and usher in the dark half of the year, the cold, cold winter. Celebrants, people who celebrated this, believed that the barriers between the physical world and the spiritual world would break down during Samhain, allowing more interaction between humans and denizens of the other world. Some of my favorite books talk about Samhain, and they talk about Tir na Nog and the veil between the supernatural world and, our world. And I find that to be fascinating. I've always found that to be fascinating because, I believe in magic, and that may seem kind of crazy, but there's things that happen that can't be explained, and I believe that there's a form of magic out there. So anytime that I read a book about Samhain or a book about this particular thing, this particular subject, of the supernatural world being blurred with our world, I find it to be fascinating, and those are among my favorite books. Holly Black writes about fairies and Tir na Nog, and she writes about, the supernatural world a lot, and she is one of my favorite authors. I absolutely love Holly Black, and I love all of her work. Ancient Celts marked Samhain as the most significant of the 4 quarterly fire festivals, taking place as a midpoint between the fall equinox and the winter solstice. This is in quotations, and I'm reading this directly from history.com/topics/holidays/Samhain. During this time of the year, hearth fires and family homes were left to burn out while the harvest was gathered. After the harvest work had been completed, people who had celebrated this joined with Druid priests to light a community fire using a wheel that would cause friction and spark flames. The wheel was considered a representation of the sun and used along with prayers. Cattle were sacrificed, and participants took a flame from the communal bonfire back to their home to relight their hearth. Early texts present Samhain as a mandatory celebration lasting 3 days, 3 nights, where the community was required to show themselves to local kings or chieftains. Failure to participate in this tradition was believed to result in punishment from the gods, usually illness or worse, death. There was also a military aspect to Samhain in Ireland, with holiday thrones prepared for commanders of soldiers. Anyone who committed a crime or used their weapons during the celebration would face a death sentence. Some documents mention 6 days of drinking alcohol to excess, typically mead or beer, along with gluttonous feasts. Samhain monsters. Because the Celts had believed that the barrier between the worlds was breachable during Samhain, they had prepared offerings that were left outside villages and fields for fairies. Fairies, like I said. It was expected that ancestors might cross over during this time as well, and Celts would dress as animals as well as monsters, so that fairies were not tempted to kidnap them. Some specific monsters were associated with the mythology surrounding Samhain, including a shape-shifting creature called a puka that receives harvest offerings from the field. The Lady Gwyn is a headless woman dressed in white who chases night wanderers and was accompanied by a black pig. The Dullahan sometimes appeared as impish creatures, sometimes headless men on horses who carried their heads riding flame-eyed horses. Their appearance was a death omen to anyone who encountered them. A group of hunters known as the Fairy Host might also haunt Samhain and kidnap people. Similar are the Sluhai, who would come from the west to enter houses and steal souls. The Myths of Samhain. One of the most popular Samhain stories told during the festival was the Second Battle of Mag Tyrd, which portrays the final conflict between the Celtic pantheon known as Duthoth di Danann and evil oppressors known as the Fomor. The myths state that the battle unfolded over the period of Samhain. One of the most famous Samhain-related stories is the Adventures of Nera, in which the hero Nera encounters a corpse and fairies and enters into the other world. Samhain figured into adventures of mythological Celtic hero Fionn Mac Cumhalley when he faced the fire-breathing underworld dweller Alien, who would burn down the Hall of Tara every Samhain. Samhain also figures into another Fionn Mac Cumhall legend where the hero is sent to the land beneath the wave. As well as taking place on Samhain, it features descriptions of the hero's holiday gatherings. Samhain in the Middle Ages. As the Middle Ages had progressed, so did the celebrations of the fire festivals. Bonfires known as Samanagans, I hope I pronounced that right. I'm terrible at pronouncing things, which were more personal to Samhain. Fires near the farms became a tradition to protect families from fairies and witches. Here's an interesting one. Carved turnips. Turnips, yes, you heard that right. Turnips, called jack-o'-lanterns, began to appear attached to strings to sticks and embedded with coal. Later, Irish traditions switched to pumpkins. In Wales, men tossed burning wood at each other in violent games and set off fireworks. In northern England, men paraded with noisemakers. Dumb supper. The tradition of dumb supper began during this time in which food was consumed by celebrants, but only after inviting ancestors to join in, giving the families a chance to interact with spirits until they left following dinner. Children would play games to entertain the dead, while adults would update the dead on the past year's news. That night, doors and windows might be left open for the dead to come in and eat cakes that had been left for them. Christian Samhain. As Christianity gained a foothold in the pagan communities, church leaders attempted to refrain from Samhain as Christian celebration. The first attempt was by Pope Boniface in the 5th century. He moved the celebration to May 13th and specified it as a day celebrating saints and martyrs. The fire festivals of October and November, however, did not end with this decree. In the 9th century, Pope Gregory moved the celebration back to the time of the fire festivals, but declared it All Saints' Days on November 1st, as All Souls' Days would follow on November 2nd. Samhain emerges with Halloween. Neither new holiday did away with the pagan aspects of the celebration. October 31st became known as All Hallows' Eve or Halloween, and contained much of the traditional pagan practices before being adopted in the 19th century America through Irish immigrants bringing their traditions across the oceans. Trick-or-treating is said to have been derived from ancient Irish and Scottish practices in the nights leading up to Samhain. In Ireland, mumming was the practice of putting on costumes, going door to door, and singing songs to the dead. Cakes were given as payment. Halloween pranks had also been a tradition in Samhain. though in the ancient celebrations, tricks were typically blamed on the fairies. Wicca and Samhain. A broad revival of Samhain resembling its traditional pagan form began in the 1980s with the growing popularity of Wicca. Wicca's celebration of Samhain takes on many forms, from the traditional fire ceremonies to the celebrations that embrace many of the aspects of modern Halloween, as well as activities related to honoring nature or ancestors. Wiccans look at Samhain as the passing of the year and incorporate common Wiccan traditions into the celebration. In the Druid tradition, Samhain celebrates the dead with a festival on October 31st and usually features a bonfire and communion with the dead. American pagans often hold music and dance celebrations called Witches' Ball in proximity of Samhain. So, see, there's so much more to Samhain than trick-or-treating and candy and horror films and dressing up in costume. Celtic Reconstructionists. Pagans who embrace Celtic traditions with the intent of reintroducing their faithfully into modern paganism are called Celtic Reconstructionists. In this tradition, Samhain is called Ochi Samnaha. It celebrates the mating between two of the Danann gods, Dagda and River Unis. Celtic Reconstructionists celebrate by placing juniper decorations around their homes and creating an altar for the dead where a feast is held in the honor of deceased loved ones. So, at this point, I'm going to tell you what my Samhain traditions are, or Halloween traditions, because I take from both and celebrate it the best way that Jaime knows how to celebrate it. We do watch kid-friendly movies with our daughter. I dress up for Halloween or Samhain, and my daughter dresses up. She doesn't really get to go trick-or-treating anymore because of COVID and the recent years of, all the illnesses and stuff. But we do make sure that we get her a goodie bag, and it has trick-or-treat related items in it. Plus, we'll get her like a Halloween movie. I go and talk to my deceased loved ones. I go down to where my cat Phoenix's final resting place is, and I will go and talk to her, and I will tell her, how much I miss her and how much, we've been doing throughout the year and that we've missed her. And I tell her about all the good things that have happened, and I go outside and I look up at the stars and I talk to my loved ones who have passed on, because I do feel like, on Hallows Eve, that veil between the land of the living and the land of the supernatural is very, very thin, and you do have more of a chance of getting to talk to your deceased loved ones. I might be considered crazy for that, but I love Halloween, and I love the ancient traditions as well as the modern traditions of Halloween. Like I said, every year we watch like Hocus Pocus, and we watch kid-friendly movies, and then me and my husband, when our daughter goes to sleep, we'll watch a scary movie if we get a chance. And we will order pizza, and we'll eat pizza, and we'll have a little bit of candy, and we'll have a Coca-Cola or whatever the soda of choice is. And we just, we have a good, healthy, happy time. And it's just, I love this time of the year. I love Halloween because it feels refreshing. It feels like all the stresses of the year kind of melt away and you get to be a kid again. You get to be youthful again and you get to just, throw your worries aside and get to just focus on seeing your kid be happy. You get to focus on you just get to focus on the new year that's going to be coming and how it can be better. I hope that you all have enjoyed this episode and I hope that it has been educational and informational. And stay tuned after the episode for a special announcement. Until next time, stay spooky. Help me take this show out on the open road. I would like to be able to film more on location. In order to do that, it takes gas money and it takes hotel money and, all that fun stuff. I am wanting to film on location in New Orleans. I'm wanting to do a whole episode about Marie Laveau, if not a 2-part series, which would be wonderful, as well as some of the other haunted places in New Orleans. I would like to talk about Anne Rice and her beloved New Orleans and what inspired her vampire chronicle books, as well as the Mayfair Witches and some of her other books. I also would like to go back to Savannah and stay at a haunted hotel or two. In order to do that, I have to have gas money and I have to have hotel money. So if anybody would like to sponsor the show, please let me know. Leave me a message in the comments. Or if you would just like to leave a tip, it's not expected, but it is very much appreciated and it will go into savings to take this show out on the open road. Thank you for watching and I hope that you all have a blessed night.